Good evening. I would like to call this informal meeting, because we do not have a quorum tonight, of the Improvement Services Advisory Committee to order. I would also like to thank the viewing audience for tuning in tonight. I also would like to ask if you would lead, Steve, if you would lead us in invocation.
Okay. Please stand. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this opportunity to bring us together while we work with the Neighborhood Improvement Services Advisory Committee for the City of Jacksonville. Help us through this trying year. Please bring all of our troops home safely. Take care of our first responders. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Steve. At this time, we would like to introduce our staff and introduce the members that are on Zoom also.
Paula Jones, member.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Pamela Trafton, Neighborhood Improvement Services Coordinator.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tracy Jackson. I'm the Interim Director of the Neighborhood Improvement Services Department.
Thank you.
And lastly, Steve Forney. I'm a member of the Neighborhood Improvement Services Advisory Committee.
Thank you. And my name is Will Smith. I'm the Vice Chairman. Tonight, we will not be able, if we can have the individuals that are on Zoom, if you please introduce yourself.
Sure, I'll start. If everybody can hear me, I'm Marcia Parrott. I'm the Associate Director of the Development Finance Initiative. Thanks for having me.
And I'll go next. I am Sonia Turner, and I'm a project manager with the Development Finance Initiative. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right. I would like to thank you all again for being here with us tonight and logging on. We will not be able to adopt the agenda tonight, and we will also not be able to have the elections due to lack of a quorum. We won't do the approval of the minutes from the last meeting also. And at this time, we will have the UNC School of Government Development Finance Initiative. We will have them do their presentation.
All right, Sonia, are you going to do the honors? Great.
Yes. Can you see that okay? Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So we are pleased to be here this evening and present our recommendations for the Country Club Villas neighborhood. The city of Jacksonville contracted with us in the summer of, or late spring rather, of 2019 to do an analysis of what's happening in the Country Club Villas neighborhood. That included a tax parcel analysis, us visiting the site, going by unit to track the conditions of the housing. It included a market analysis. It also included a financial feasibility analysis to understand the sort of the current trends of what's happening in the neighborhood and identify current conditions, and then think through strategies to help get the neighborhood to where the city would like to see it. And so this presentation is going to start off with an overview of our findings, of the current conditions, and then offer some recommendations for the revitalization of the Country Club Villas neighborhood. And so, Marcia, would you like to maybe give a brief overview of who DFI is?
Sure. And thanks again for having y'all. We wish we could be there in person. We know this is not the ideal setting, but we'll do our best. And please interrupt us with questions or comments throughout this presentation. Go ahead, Sonia. Next slide, please.
Right.
There's the agenda. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So we are the Development Finance Initiative, or DFI. We're a program of the UNC Chapel Hill School of Government. which is the largest university-based research, teaching, and advising organization for local government officials in the country. So our group in particular is a program of the Community Economic Development Program, and we are a group of real estate development professionals who help local governments and their partners bring a private investment lens to challenges that they face in the public realm. So that's why we were brought in as a consulting group, and excited to be with you all to share the outcome of our findings.
Right. Great. So when we work on projects in whatever community we go in, we like to identify what the interests or the goals are for that specific project. And so early on in our work with Jacksonville, we sat down with staff and identified some interests for the Country Club Villas neighborhood. Those interests included, first, improving neighborhood conditions and appearance, alleviating strain on city resources for the neighborhood, and that particularly speaks to trash collection, police, policing, etc. Decrease the number of distressed and vacant properties, increase owner and resident engagement, create opportunities for home ownership, and attract private investment and minimize public investment. And so throughout this presentation, you will see sort of a common thread of our recommendations aligning with the city interests and addressing these interests that you see. So diving into the neighborhood, there are a total of 126 units. We see it's largely renter occupied. So this is a townhouse development. And the townhouses are, typically townhouses are owned by individual owners. And in this neighborhood, what we see is that the townhouses are, instead of being largely homeowner occupied, close to 90% renter occupied, compared to 61% for the city of Jacksonville. So higher renter occupancy in this neighborhood. You also see a higher vacancy compared to the city, more than double. And you see a lower average tax value for properties than comparable neighborhoods. And so current conditions in Country Club Villas, we see 50% of the properties are distressed. And when we say distressed, it's a combination of mild, moderate, and severe. And this map highlights where these properties of distress are located. What you'll find that's interesting is that the distress is dispersed across the neighborhood. So there is no one pocket that sometimes we see in other neighborhoods. This one is pretty evenly dispersed. The next thing is that the most...
Sonia, let me interrupt real quick just to say that with the distress, y'all might be wondering, we did not go inside any units, obviously, to collect these distress measures. This was based on a visual survey conducted by myself and Sonia and several other staff members. I think it was in July. I remember it was very hot. I think it was July this past summer, where we calculated this distress and the severity based on a visual survey. So what we could see from the outside, but not the inside. Sorry,
yeah,
Sonia, go ahead.
Thank you for that clarification. So the next thing we found were that the most severely distressed units were vacant. And so just understanding that spatially, of those units that are vacant, 63% have, or of the distress units that are severe, 63% of them are vacant. So we begin to see a strong relationship between vacancy and level of distress in the neighborhood. And we'll speak to that later on in our recommendations. The last item, 60% of the owners of distressed units live in Jacksonville. So that was something that was brought up early on in our meetings, sort of a perception that there were a lot of out-of-town owners contributing to distress in the neighborhood. What we found is that the data actually showed that a majority of these owners actually are Jacksonville residents.
Hello, Miss Sonia, this is Will Smith. I had a quick
Yes.
question for you. On
Yes.
the graphic that had the different colors, now, does that mean that the majority of those residents are under some level of distress? Or is that all of them? Because I didn't see any green that would indicate that some of them were good. Yeah,
Right. Right. So we did leave, so if you don't see a color, that does mean that we did not observe any visible signs of distress. So this map is only highlighting those that showed some sign of distress. Does that answer your question?
yes, ma'am. Okay, I see where they are now. They're just outlined in gray. Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So another current condition we observed in the Country Club Villas neighborhood is what we identified as deficiencies in site design and infrastructure. So there are several characteristics in the neighborhood that when it was constructed actually are feeding into and fueling some of the challenges that the city has been facing in this neighborhood. So first, trash collection has been identified by both staff members and residents that we spoke with and local stakeholders as an issue in the neighborhood. What we found is that just the way that the units are designed with significant clusters of townhouses together, coupled with limited to no space behind units, really posed a challenge for trash bin removal from the street. So if an individual lives in a center townhouse unit, we heard from various stakeholders that their option, and also due to property lines and fences, would be to roll their trash bin through their unit in order to move it from the street, which is not a desirable or ideal setup. Ideally, there would be some common space behind the units that individuals could move their trash bins to. That's not really the case in this neighborhood with the property lines, how they're drawn, and the fencing. Additionally, we found that the ditch around the neighborhood within the tree buffer collected a lot of trash, sort of additionally pulling down just the visual look and feel of the neighborhood. The next item we identified was parking. So each unit has about 4 parking spaces in front of it we identify as double bay parking. So one bay can fit 2 cars sort of facing one another. And we found that each unit had about 2 of these, so they could fit 4 cars in front of their unit. Some units are taking advantage of that, we saw as we were walking through. There were several units that had 3 or 4 cars parked in front of them. But one of the challenges we identified is that this double bay or this double stacked parking really presented the neighborhood as a sea of concrete, particularly also due to the fact that a lot of this parking was cracked, stained with oil, having grass and different just different weeds and things growing in it. And so that also pulled down the neighborhood, but that as far as visually the look and feel of the neighborhood. But again, that's not to the fault of the residents. That's just a design deficiency. When these were built, that wasn't taken into consideration. Additionally, we found that there were no play areas for children, a lack of green space, tree canopy, yards, no real community gathering space for residents. And additionally, we identified the one point of entry in the tree buffer, effectively concealing the neighborhood. And on the one hand, offering privacy, which can be ideal for residents. But on the other hand, in this case, with some of the other factors, it really created sort of an insulation of this neighborhood from the surrounding area as far as visibility, allowing for perhaps more questionable activities to sort of feel I guess, at liberty to take place in this neighborhood because of the minimal visibility from the surrounding streets and businesses. So there's an interesting dynamic we see here, though, with this neighborhood. Despite the current conditions, despite the high levels of distress that we see, despite the deficiencies in site design, Country Club Villas is meeting an affordable housing need in Jacksonville. So we see that the median gross rents for Country Club Villas is between $600 to $675 for a 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom, respectively. But for the city, for those same units, you're looking at around $840 to $850 for a 3-bedroom, close to $1,150. And so when we dug into that a bit more, we found that the rents in Country Club Villas are affordable for households earning 30 to 50% of the area median income. So that equates to households earning about $26,000 to $29,000 per year, which is roughly these types of occupations: your healthcare support workers, food prep, construction workers, preschool teachers, and your drivers and sales workers. And so what we're finding is that although there are these current conditions that really negatively impact Country Club Villas neighborhood, we're seeing that it's serving a need in Jacksonville's community, as illustrated by this next diagram. The greatest cost burden segment in Jacksonville are those individuals earning 30% to 50% of your area median income. So those individuals.
And Sonia,
earning,
what
yes.
does cost burden mean? Sorry,
Yes,
or maybe you were
thank you.
going there, but yeah.
Yes, yes. Yes, thank you. And so cost burden, great question. When we say cost burden, that means individuals paying more than 30% of their income to housing expenses. So that's not only rent, but that includes utilities as well and related expenses. And so what we see—
And I'll add just the reason we think of this as an important measure for affordable housing is that a rule of thumb is that folks should be spending no more than 30% on housing and utilities. And if they're spending more, that's less money to spend on childcare, on groceries, on medicine, so all the other things that are important. So cost burden is a way to measure the strain on lower income families and what high housing costs can do to them.
Right. Great. And so what you'll see here in this chart is that within the city, your Jacksonville's greatest cost burdened individuals or households are those earning that $26,000 to $29,000 bracket. And the reason this is significant is because Jacksonville's economy is largely sort of at the top employers. I'll say it this way: your top employers are your government and your military, and then the second top employer is your retail, accommodation, and food services, those industry sectors. And so what you see is that the housing, the rents currently in Country Club Villas are really serving that second top employment industry in your city. And so additionally, we're finding that population growth in Jacksonville is outpacing housing production. So it's Jacksonville is growing slightly, or is projected to grow slightly faster than the state, and definitely more than the county. And that the total housing units in Jacksonville is only growing by 4% compared to the city proper, compared to 10% of housing units being built in the county. So effectively, you're seeing more, any new product that is coming on outside of Jacksonville. Now, we also highlighted that Jacksonville's housing market has additionally been impacted by hurricanes, and specifically, we have a picture here of the most recent Hurricane Florence in 2018. That took a lot of housing stock off of the market and further compressed Jacksonville's housing market. And so from these past few slides, sort of the overarching narrative is that although Country Club Villas is showing these negative current conditions, what we're seeing is that it is filling a housing need in the market. And so that's something to keep in mind as we continue.
Excuse me,
Um,
this is Paula
yes.
Jones. Did you say that the cost burden included utilities of the 30%?
Yes.
30%
Yes.
of the, okay, included utilities, all right, thank you.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes. So we also wanted to highlight the financial incentive for owners and country club villas. So one of the arguments could and perhaps frustrations that could exist within the neighborhood is, why aren't owners fixing up their units? And what we found is that as we ran the numbers, we find that there's actually more of a financial incentive for owners to not repair their units than to repair them. And what we mean by that is that compared to similar properties in Jacksonville, townhouses and country club villas are selling for almost 50% lower. They're renting for almost 40% less, and they have a tax value of 40% lower, which I alluded to earlier. So what we're finding is that owners, if they were to renovate their units under current conditions, they still wouldn't be able to charge rents to really recover the cost that they've put into their units, and so therefore they would be losing money. So it would really require a collective action from all of the owners or majority of the owners to improve their units, so that all the owners would sort of see the value and benefit of increased rents and increased sales prices. And one thing that I did not highlight earlier, but I wanted to just touch base on, sort of speaking to this collective action. For the case of country club villas, most of the townhouses being built in Jacksonville today have what is called a homeowners association in place. And so what's particular to country club villas is that although there were articles put in place within the restrictive covenants for the creation of something that could potentially evolve into a homeowners association, that was never established. And so some of the issues that this neighborhood is experiencing, such as deferred maintenance of units and overgrown grass, and even parking lot challenges as it pertains to appearance and trash collection, those are things that a homeowners association would typically manage. And so what we're finding is that because there's no homeowners association in country club villas, that adds an additional layer of challenge to sort of some of the revitalization that the city would like to see in this neighborhood. And so this next slide.
Tanya,
yes.
I can't help but point out you are the president of your own homeowners association in Durham. So can you give a little description for those who might not be familiar of what types of activities a homeowners association might take care of? Or maybe I'm spoiling it. But,
yeah, no problem. Yeah, so a homeowners association, in effect, is a sort of a private sector sort of enforcement. I want to use the word code enforcement, but within the private sector. So the homeowners association is a collective group of owners who ultimately hold one another accountable to keep their properties, to maintain their properties for the goal of maintaining and increasing their property values. And so if there's someone who is not maintaining their property, the homeowners association can follow up with that owner, send them notices, and even fine the owner if they are not complying with certain things that all the owners had collectively agreed to have in place. And so homeowners associations typically do charge dues, and those dues are collected so that the association can manage things such as maybe dumpster rentals or repainting shutters or doing parking lot repair, things like that. And so Typically in Jacksonville, homeowners associations are common, especially with your newer constructions. And honestly, actually, Country Club Villas was built in the late 70s, early 80s, and there were some comparable townhouses built around the same time that also do have homeowners associations in place. So Country Club Villas is a bit unique in that that was never implemented. So this next slide, actually, I'll toss this to you, Marcia.
Yeah, so just to summarize the things that y'all have heard up until this point, Country Club Villas is in an interesting position in that although the conditions aren't ideal and there is some distress in the neighborhood, it's obviously meeting a very important affordable housing need that your community has. But because there is no homeowners association, because there are these challenges with the design and the infrastructure of the neighborhood, and the city's code enforcement isn't additionally yielding the outcomes that they would hope for, there's this cycle of disinvestment that keeps the conditions less than ideal in the neighborhood. So that is what this chart is meant to illustrate, that it's not just about individual owners or individual residents, it's about these greater systems, no HOA, poor site design, poor infrastructure that are causing these conditions to reoccur. So trying to make sure that we're not just thinking about individuals and people who are to blame, but thinking about these greater systems that are helping to perpetuate this cycle of disinvestment that's occurring.
Great.
Thanks, Sonia.
And so with that said, with everything that we've covered, we do believe that there is a case for neighborhood change in Country Club Villas. And this illustration you see before you is actually a photo from the neighborhood that we did a little Photoshop work to, but it's a picture of what the neighborhood could look like. So based on the size of the units, Country Club Villas, it could position itself to be a desirable place to live. We identified that there have been positive improvements within the past year reported by residents and city staff. It's in an excellent location, proximity to transit, restaurants, the hospital, the mall, the community college. It's really great location. Additionally, it's a small and manageable neighborhood, meaning that any interventions that the city might take is confined within this area, so you can easily measure sort of the impact. You would be able to see impact over time a bit more clearly than perhaps in a much larger area. There has been consistent participation from some engaged owners in the neighborhood, and that's a positive. And there is an opportunity here to provide quality, affordable housing in Jacksonville. And so with that, sort of with this case for neighborhood change, we're going to present our recommendations. And I'll pause for a second. Are there any questions about anything that I've shared up to this point?
Any
No, ma'am,
surprises with the current conditions? Oh, go ahead.
No, there are no surprises and no questions at this time.
All right, thank you. So with that, we know based on our conversations with staff, the city has allotted over $600,000 of its community development block grant funds for Country Club Villas over the next 5 years for infrastructure improvement. However, neighborhood appearance has been identified consistently, both with stakeholders, residents, and staff, as a considerable challenge in the neighborhood. And so therefore, our recommendation, we believe to achieve the city's interests, there will need to be a combination of both public and private investment, and that the city will also need to expand its toolkit to help achieve its interests. So this is a recommendations roadmap that we pulled together. The first recommendation we believe, or that we've identified, is public investment in infrastructure. We'll talk about that more. Second recommendation is incentivizing and encouraging private investment in unit appearance and neighborhood appearance as a whole. The third recommendation is around a homeowners association. The fourth is for the city in strengthening code enforcement. Our fifth recommendation is for the city to expand their toolkit, their tools that they can use to help aid in the revitalization of this neighborhood. And then our sixth recommendation speaks to the city taking a proactive role in acquiring and selling properties. And so starting with the first recommendation, we have identified through conversation with staff and also stakeholders 4 key areas that we believe the city can make strategic investments in to help posture the Country Club Villas neighborhood to be a more desirable location for people to live and want to live in, to move into and live in. The first is speaking to trash. We did explore the installation of dumpsters. We spoke with a local property manager in Jacksonville of some of these comparable townhouse communities and found that they preferred and they actually recommended using dumpsters in neighborhoods similar to Country Club Villas and of the size of Country Club Villas to individual trash bins. And so that's something we've talked about and explored with the city. Additionally, for parking, we did identify a recommendation of decreasing the parking available in front of units and increasing front lawns in front of units. And so that's pretty much what this is. This is more of a sketch, but the idea to, again, enhance the appearance of the units by adding a little bit more green space. And also adding visitor parking along the side streets that you see noted here. We identified the potential to add a recreation and gathering space. And we also identified, speaking to the front entry and appearance, adding an island and signage to create a sense of place for the neighborhood. And to do these items, we estimated a price of $525,000 to $825,000, which would align quite well with the city's CDBG funds that they have available. And we did prepare a report of our findings and also our recommendations that we will make available to the city. So we are not going to go into detail on each of these items tonight. But I did want to make you aware that we do have a report that we will provide to Tracy and Pamela that details all of this that we'll make available after we present tonight. So next, private investment. So we believe that as the city makes their as the city makes their investments in the neighborhood, we believe there should be an equal response from the private sector. And again, we go into more detail about this in our report, but as the city is making their investments, we believe that there should be a partnership with the private sector, meaning the homeowners in the neighborhood, to encourage homeowners to invest in their units. And based on our analysis, we found that approximately $15,000 to $20,000 per unit would need to be invested to sort of bring the exterior appearance of units to a place that we would identify as sort of a baseline / comparable to other townhouse neighborhoods in Jacksonville. And so this includes things like pressure washing, gutter repair, siding, potential roof repair, some of those things that we observed as we walked around the neighborhood, that if these things were done, collectively, it would bring up the appearance. And we believe the private sector should do that. Our third recommendation is for a homeowners association. One of the questions that we asked internally as a team and also with staff is, if the city makes an investment of $600,000 and if owners make investments individually of $15,000 to $20,000, will their investment be sustainable? And a question about who takes on the long-term maintenance. So if the city came in and did all these investments, but there was no private sector group to sort of continue to enforce and hold owners accountable, then who's to say that the neighborhood won't be in the same place 5 years from now, right? And so it's really a question of sustainability, and ensuring that the city, when you make your investments in this neighborhood, that you're catalyzing a long-term revitalization versus a short-term, and then it's back on your plate again in a few years. And so we believe that it's the private sector who should take on that long-term management and maintenance for this neighborhood, especially since this is a townhouse community with individual owners. And so for that, we recommend our recommendation is that the city does encourage an HOA, and we believe that there are benefits to a homeowners association as far as protecting the owner's investment, the city's investment, and the residents' quality of life. Again, we elaborate more on this in the report, but this was our third recommendation. Our fourth recommendation is around strengthening code enforcement. And Marcia, would you like to speak to this one?
Sure, Sonia, if you want to go ahead, and great. So in our conversations with city staff, we noticed that perhaps the city is not utilizing all of the code enforcement tools that they have available to them. So we identified some deficiencies in the current code enforcement system. The staff is amazing. They're doing the best they can with the tools that they have at their disposal, but we think that there are some more tools that they could be empowered to use so that they could be more effective. We do want to keep in mind, I have this bullet point here that says code enforcement should be efficient, effective, and equitable. We want to point out that with code enforcement, that there are sometimes owners who face hardship or residents who might be more vulnerable to code enforcement. So we do think code enforcement is an important tool to make sure that owners are maintaining their properties, especially for the benefit of their neighbors. Because when one owner doesn't maintain their property, it can bring down the value of all those properties. That said, we think it's important with a code enforcement system that you have some other programs in place that can protect low-income homeowners, elderly homeowners who might be vulnerable to code enforcement actions. So use code enforcement, but keep in mind that there are vulnerable populations that you want to protect with that use. We know that one of the challenges with the city of Jacksonville to having a more rigorous code enforcement program is the legal resources that are required to carry out code enforcement. So something that we've seen effective in other communities is outsourcing the legal review for code enforcement actions. Because that can be a big burden on one city attorney, we found in other communities that want to get serious about their code enforcement, outsource that legal review to expedite it and make it happen. And then finally, we think that a review of your minimum housing ordinance is due. One thing that we especially want to point out is you can change your housing ordinance to require that owners repair and improve their properties and don't give them the option to board up and vacate. So yes, you can have an ordinance that says, I want you to make this improvement, and if you don't want to make it, you don't get to just board up the property, leave it vacant, and abandon. You have to make those repairs. Because as we know in Country Club Villas, there is a high rate of vacant, boarded up properties, and this is bringing down the neighborhood, making people feel unsafe. So you can change your housing ordinances to require that owners repair and that they do not have the option to board up and vacate. And we think that would be really important for Country Club Villa. Again, there's a lot to say about code enforcement. Gave you a quick run through there, but as Sonia said, more details in our report.
Great. And so our fifth recommendation, sort of in that same vein, what Marcia spoke to, of the city expanding its toolkit. So neighborhood revitalization strategy area is something that the city of Jacksonville was already pursuing before bringing DFI on board. And so we know that it allows for enhanced flexibility and using the community development block grant funds. And so we believe that our recommendations are in alignment with the NERSA and that our report will provide the city with the information they need to move forward with pursuing that as a designation for this neighborhood so that they can deploy those funds for some of the recommended public investments that we identified. The next is an urban redevelopment area. And so a URA is an area targeted for redevelopment by a local government, and it does allow for some enhanced, actions the local government can take. And Marcia, would you like to maybe speak to this a bit more? Yeah.
And you see a list of those tools that open up to a local government if they designate an area as an urban redevelopment area, which does require a lot more community participation and feedback from residents and owners. If the city does want to go down that route, a very participatory planning process is required. But you see the list of tools here. Doesn't necessarily mean that you use all those tools. One that stands out to me, or there are a couple that stand out to me, but one is targeted code enforcement. It can be expensive to do more stringent code enforcement citywide. So having a URA allows the city to do more experimental, more piloted, more strategic code enforcement in just country club villas, which could be useful since code enforcement can be expensive from a legal perspective. Another interesting tool that's available through a URA is, and I don't think it's actually listed here, but for any properties that the city owns and then sells to the private sector, they can put restrictive covenants on that property to limit its future uses, which can be helpful in that they could say things like it has to be owner occupied or it has to be improved within a certain number of years. So what that does is add an extra layer of protection to make sure that any new owners that the city brings into the fold are owners who understand and will abide by the city and the residents' goals for the neighborhood. That's a brief spiel on URAs. There's a lot more to say, again, in the report.
Great. And so our sixth recommendation, acquire and sell properties. So these last few recommendations, we're really sort of speaking to this point we have in blue. The public sector or the city can take a proactive role in the revitalization of country club villas. We've identified what the private sector can do as far as encouraging unit appearance, improving that, and also a homeowners association. But as the city, you can take a proactive role in this neighborhood. We've talked about code enforcement. We've talked about expanding the toolkit, but also in acquiring and selling properties. So we've identified that the city could utilize additional funding sources to secure site control of 15 properties over the next 5 years. Where the number 15 comes from is that currently there are around 25 properties, 20 to 25 properties in the neighborhood that fall under that severely distressed or vacant boarded category. And so it would really be the city targeting those properties that are in that condition and acquiring them over the next 5 years. And then the city taking the leadership to encourage a mixed use, or rather mixed income neighborhood by revitalizing those properties and then selling them, some at market rate levels and some at affordable levels. And so this again is another tool that the city has at its disposal. So one of the things we wanted to highlight is this idea of mitigating displacement in country club villas. So we've provided a lot of recommendations for what the city can do. But what we find, and something that local governments also have to be proactive about, is that the current residents in country club villas, as we noted earlier, living there are they are within what we found, that 30 to 50% income bracket. So housing in country club villas is most affordable for those individuals earning that $26,000 to $29,000 range. And as improvements are made and as rents increase and as houses sell for more, there's the potential for the current residents to be displaced. And so as a city, there's a conversation that we definitely recommend and encourage around how do you mitigate that displacement so that the individuals living currently in country club villas, that many of them could potentially still continue to live in country club villas even after the revitalization, or rather while the revitalization is taking place. And so we've talked about cost burden. This is a table displaying that information a bit differently. So what you see, what we find is that within Jacksonville at large, almost 50% of residents in the city are cost burden, meaning almost 50% of residents in Jacksonville are paying more than 30% of their income on housing costs. And that's significant. And so when we look at that, and again, remembering that population growth is outpacing new housing supply in the city, there's a question, where will these renters go? Because we're finding that there's housing supply is constrained, and particularly affordable housing supply. So we leave you with that question. We're not going to answer that question. That is a question that the city will need to answer. But Country Club Villas is just an example of one neighborhood in your city that is meeting this affordable housing need, but is experiencing high levels of distress and vacancy and just other current conditions that make revitalization challenging without intervention. But we've also, with staff, identified some other neighborhoods that are headed in the same direction as Country Club Villas without intervention. And so there is this larger affordability conversation that needs to be had. And perhaps looking at Country Club Villas as a demonstration project that then can help the city with other neighborhoods that may be moving in the same direction. So to summarize,
Hello, Ms. Sonia.
Yes.
I have one question. In your report, did you kind of lay out those other neighborhoods that we need to look at? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So to summarize, we believe that in order to achieve the city's interest for this neighborhood, there will need to be a combination of both public and private investment. The city is encouraged to champion a homeowners association for long-term stewardship in the neighborhood. Additionally, the city will need to expand its toolkit. We talked about code enforcement, pursuing special neighborhood designations, and making strategic investments in acquiring and selling properties. And beyond Country Club Villas, speaking to the last slides that we touched on, there's a conversation around the city and affordable housing, and perhaps facilitating the creation of more affordable housing in Jacksonville. And so with that, we are finished. So we thank you and open it up for any questions you may have.
How would we possibly create an HOA and still keep the cost down for this area in the way of rents and stuff? That's my concern, because I mean, some people could take the burden, but especially if you're looking towards these people of that income to buy these houses, how can you possibly have an HOA that could be affordable to take care of the area, plus have these people be able to afford it? That's my question.
So that is a great question. And we, as a team, actually partnered with the Duke Law Clinic. So they have a program where law students will work on a community revitalization project and do some research and dive into the sort of legal and statutory authority for what it would take, and in the case of this neighborhood, what it would take to start a homeowners association. And so that is included within our report as a very detailed analysis, speaking to the cost of a homeowners association. So that's something where if the neighborhood were willing to go that route, there are, I believe that there's a path that could include maybe to start a smaller HOA fee that perhaps the owners could come together and identify. Let's say, for now, we want the homeowners association to manage trash rental. and dumpster rental. So we want dumpsters. We want to start an HOA. We want to start collecting or getting a collective buy-in and sort of just concern and care for the neighborhood. So we want to start the HOA, and we want the HOA to manage perhaps maybe it's dumpster rental and cutting grass. Well, based on our analysis, we found that based on the number of units in country club villas and also the cost of those services, you could identify an HOA dues amount that we felt would be pretty comparable to what some other newer neighborhoods are charging, but still cover those fees. So we did an analysis looking at several dues ranges from as low as $20 per month, going as high as $60 per month, just depending on what you want the Homeowners Association to cover. So we do believe that there is, if affordability is a concern, that as owners, you could come together and identify what that perhaps threshold is to start. And then as the neighborhood improves and as you start building a reserves and as you see things working, you can increase the dues over time to sort of cover the cost of maybe more things you would like the HOA to cover or increasing expenses. Does that answer your question?
Ms. Susan, I just thank you for your question. I just want to point out that it is inevitable that there will be displacement, though. As the quality of the neighborhood goes up, the rents that can be commanded will go up. That means that it will not be affordable for some renters, which is why we think the city should think about where they can provide more affordable rental housing throughout the city so that this isn't the only opportunity for affordable rental housing. And in the cities, if the city were to acquire those current vacant properties and then sell them to partners, perhaps they want to sell them to, for example, nonprofit partners or CDCs who can provide subsidized affordable rental housing. Because the fact is that affordable rental housing does require subsidy because you can't charge low rents and make money off of it. It's very challenging. So you bring out a good point. And I think that is one that will require public leadership in order to mitigate the impacts on those residents who are most vulnerable and are going to be impacted by these improvements.
Any other questions?
Any other questions from those that are watching via Zoom? Okay. Well, we would like to, Ms. Sonia and Ms. Marcia, I would like to thank you for your presentation. Very informative, and I think we got a lot of it tonight. We look forward to seeing the full report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, we'll have a planning board update by Mr. Steve Fortney.
Good evening, all. The planning board did, excuse me. Let me put my mic on. Good evening, all. We did meet almost every single month.
Okay.
And I'm not going to go through the complete updates because that is this. And a large amount of what was accomplished was many ordinance updates. And I think if you took a look at the actual council meetings, you would see that almost every one of our recommendations, they took to heart and they did approve. And there's many things in the mill. I think we're averaging close to 700 permits, or I should say inspections and all that. So the construction side continued on within the city limits of Jacksonville during this virus that we have.
Wow.
So, okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Next, we have a community development update by Ms. Tracy Jackson.
Good evening, everyone. It is good to be back from the COVID absence that we had because of COVID-19. So it is a pleasure to be back amongst you again. Just wanted to give you an update with our community development block grant planning activities that we have. Wanted to go over the CDBG funding that we received. Also wanted to give an update with our fiscal year 21-22 annual action plan activities and planning. And also wanted to give an update on our CD projects that we have been conducting and activities that we've been conducting over the last few months. Because of COVID-19, our nation has declared a national disaster. And we have received, because of COVID-19, in the first round of funding from HUD, $219,446. With those dollars, we have developed a utility assistance program. We've also provided some rental assistance and provided some home and shelter supplies. Tentatively, we have, in the third round, we're going to be receiving $310,803 additional funds from our funder HUD. We're also in the middle of planning our community action plan. We're having community input meetings. We have 2 scheduled. One would be November the 12th at 6 p.m. at the Trent River Oakley Grove Missionary Baptist Association building in Georgetown. And the other one would be January 21st, 2021 at 6 p.m. at the Onslow County Public Library. Of course, we invite our advisory committee to come and help us get the word out. We had a very good showing last year at our community input meeting, and we would like for the public to come out and tell us how we should spend those dollars that's going to be coming into this community next year. We had a very good time with our Bishop Will Smith. He conducted the meeting and he did a fantastic job. Also wanted to tell you about our CDBG projects, homeownership, 211 Sherwood Road. It was completed in March 2020. And we also had a capital project in Georgetown that we completed. So that is the finished house that we completed on 211 Sherwood Road, the homeowner. She's very pleased with her house. And if others would like to find out how they can purchase their house, the next homebuyer education class is scheduled November 21st. It's from 8:30 to 5 p.m. Call our office, 910-938-5286 to register so that they can learn how to purchase their home. We also completed the Georgetown bathroom. It's a nice facility in the Georgetown Park. We're very, very pleased with the product that we put over there in that area. And we hope that folks will go out and enjoy the park and that amenity and investment. Now, I also wanted to touch on what's happening in Country Club Villas. One of the things that Marcia alluded to is that the city would need to acquire more properties. And what we have done is we have purchased at least 3 properties in that area. And we have started the renovations on 2 of those properties. So we purchased 444 and 446 Myrtlewood. Those are the 2 in units, and those were really distressed properties. And with 444 Myrtlewood, we started with the renovations, and this is during that renovation where we had to completely gut out that unit. And now we have a unit that's going to be affordable. We're going to be selling this property to a low-income family so that this house is going to be affordable for them. And this is one of the bedrooms, and that is the other bedroom. It's a 2-bedroom unit in the middle. That's the kitchen area along with the dining room area. And this is going to be part of the finished product. This is going to be an affordable house for a first-time homeowner to purchase, and it's going to be available in the next few months. And that's almost finished as far as the outside of the unit. So we're doing what we can to make sure that we turn that area around in Myrtlewood by purchasing some of those properties. We have an opportunity to purchase 2 more distressed properties. Like Marcia reported, we're going to go after the most distressed units because we have the opportunity to bring those units up so that they can be purchased by low-income people to address the affordable housing need that's in that area. And that's all I have.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Tracy, I had just one question about
Yes.
your brief. When you were talking about the CARES Act, it was, on the slide, it mentioned like, I think it was,
It was the CARES Act, the additional funding. This is additional funding we received along with our entitlement funds.
yes, ma'am. Back a little bit, and it talked about 3 things that you're helping with. I think one was utility assistance.
Yes.
Now, I'm sure, have all of these funds been already used?
No.
And rental assistance, the homeless shelter supplies and things like that?
Well, Pam, she can give you an update on the utility assistance because she's been administering that program.
So good evening. And I'm glad that you brought up the question about CARES Act funding. So with the full program, we have currently served 147 families for a total of $63,888.74. We still have funds available within our first round because we started out with 70,000. And for those that are not familiar with what our utility assistance is, for those that are city residents, we are accepting applications for those that need assistance with their water billing. So this is if you have an account with the city of Jacksonville water bill, and we are approving those through HUD income limits. So if they apply for it, they have to provide additional documentation that shows their current income, what income they've received in 2020, whether that is an actual employer, Social Security, child support orders, whether they're receiving the child support or not, and actual unemployment assistance due to the pandemic as well as regular unemployment. Once we have the full documentation and they've been approved, we can cover up to 6 months as long as funding is still available. So that is our CARES Act funding.
The rental assistance is administered through East Carolina Human Service Agency. So we partner with them because they already give CDBG funds for rent and utility assistance. So they will administer the rental assistance for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, for either one of those programs that people can, I just want to make sure those applications are on the city website.
Yes.
So they can go there. But it's no number specifically that they can call to find out more information about it.
Yes, sir. They can reach us at 910-938-5286, and that's for utility assistance. For those that are needing assistance with rental, they may contact East Carolina Human Services, and their phone number is 910-347-2151.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right. So we'll move forward to neighborhood initiatives. which I'm sure you're wondering what is neighborhood initiatives. It is formerly Office of Livable Neighborhoods, and due to some changes, we are now called Neighborhood Improvement Services Advisory Committee, and Neighborhood Initiatives is formerly Office of Livable Neighborhoods. So our demolition update, we are currently have 138 demolitions complete. We're currently working on 139 with 2 more in the pipeline. So before the end of 2020, we will be complete with 141 demolitions. This is our most recent one off of Poplar Drive, which is downtown. During process. And this is the final picture for our demolition. Jacksonville Youth Council. Due to COVID pandemic guidelines, our Jacksonville Youth Council has met a little differently this year. We have actually opened up our meetings to our youth council officers only with a special guest. This will be our 3rd virtual meeting where we sponsor it on Facebook. Our first meeting, we hosted Chief Yanero, where we had we call them candid conversations, where the youth council officers are able to talk to the guest speaker, and Chief Yanero talked about how do teens interact with the police department if they were ever stopped by the police. Our second meeting was with Councilman Brian Jackson. We talked about the importance of voting and actually found out that teens are able to register to vote at 16. And they can vote at the age of 17 as long as they'll be 18 when the general election takes place. So that was very interesting to find out. And next Thursday, we will have our meeting with Whitney Jessic, and she's going to talk about the mental health and the physical health of our teens and even adults that tune in when it comes to COVID-19 and how are we impacted by everything that has taken place over these past, we are almost at 8 months of being in the pandemic currently. So we definitely want you to tune in to our Facebook on the Jacksonville Youth Council page. For our nonprofits, we have our last virtual executive roundtable, which will be Wednesday, November 18th, and will focus on strategic planning. You may go to our website, jacksonvillenc.gov/nonprofit to register. This is normally available for our executive directors. However, with it being a virtual meeting this time, we invite the executive directors, board, and staff to be present for a strategic planning session. Also for our nonprofits, we ask that you save the date. With our annual action plan funding taking place, we have our workshops, which will commence on December 17th at 10 a.m. and December 18th at 2 p.m. And these 2 workshops are for those nonprofits that are interested in receiving funding for fiscal year 2021-2022. And those dates again are December 17th at 10 a.m. and December 18th at 2 p.m.
Also, as far as reports, as Pam shared, during the August council meeting, we had an opportunity to look at our department with the expected retirement of Lily Gray. We found, we saw a way that we could reorganize, and that's why we looked at what we did and we changed our name. We presented to City Council, and now we are the Neighborhood Improvement Services Department. With that, we wanted to give you all an opportunity to also look at the committee that you're on, and there's always ways to improve. One of the things that we like for you to look at to see whether or not you would like to change when you meet. And there's options to meet at 5 o'clock, at 5:30, if you want to stay the same. But we wanted to offer you all this opportunity to think about it, and we can come back at our next meeting and you can make a decision as a group. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So with that, we have an event that's scheduled. Very pleased to announce this event that's scheduled for October 29th. This is the Onslow Community Outreach. This is an opening ceremony for the shelter. Community Development Block Grants funds and the city has invested some dollars in 2015 so that they can improve the building that they had an opportunity to purchase and make that facility a homeless shelter. So they are completing that project, and they have a ceremony on Thursday, October 29th at 10 a.m. for those who would like to attend. Also, wanted to give you a report on the Census 2020. We know we had some challenges with the census and with COVID and with just a lot of negative information that was given out there, to folks. So with the Census 2020, Jacksonville, we only reported 58.6% compared to 10 years ago where we reported about 75%. What does that mean? That means because of the lack of reporting and the responses, we will be getting less funds. So, go ahead.
Okay. I was gonna say, one of the things that was pointed out is we did beat out Greenville. So Greenville's mayor has to wear our mascot costume. So there was a challenge between Greenville and Jacksonville's mayor. So Jacksonville did win out there.
Yes. 99.9% as far as self-response and follow-ups, the Greenville area households have been reached. So, what do the numbers mean? Based on in our area, 5,200 based on household count, 65,100 based on response rates. So we lost those counts. The potential money that we lost based on household count is 42 million. Over the next 10 years, we're gonna be losing $1.2 billion based on response rates. How does that affect us? That affects how many roads we can build, how many schools we can build, how many fire stations we can build, how much CDBG funding that we get in an area. So the Census 2020, those numbers are real numbers, and those communities will be affected by those numbers. Ms. Paula?
So now that you see this, is there anything else that could have been done? Can you think of anything else that could have been done? I mean, there was so much advertising. There were signs posted in yards. I have a cousin who came to my house and we got on the computer and did his census count. And he lives over in the Richlands area. He doesn't use a computer, but he got out there to do his part. Is there anything else that could possibly have been done to, you could do it on your phone.
Yes, ma'am. I think because of COVID, I think some of the messages didn't get to those folks. They were afraid to come out. They were afraid to come to those public events so that they can fill out the census. Also, wrong messages got to those folks who did not want to self-report. They didn't answer their doors when the census workers went out there, and they went back and they still didn't answer their doors. So
Now, there were some people who received census forms in the mail.
Yes.
I was not one of them. My mother was not one of them. I went online and did our census, so I don't know whether that would have anything to do with it as well. It's a possibility. I would imagine that I was not the only person that did not receive a census form in the mail.
I think you were assigned, you only got a postcard, and you were assigned a number on that postcard, and then you were instructed to go online and fill that out on some of them. I
There
know I
wasn't a
received a
card.
postcard.
I just went online.
Yeah.
I just went online and was able to do it.
And see, I went online and did it, but I also received the information through the mail.
Right.
And I think one of the biggest issues was, like Ms. Tracy said, was the, you know, the pandemic and people being afraid, the mismessaging. And so with that being said, and since we have been in a state of emergency, you know, since back in, I think, March timeframe, is there any consideration that they're considering? I don't know if we can ask the census, those that are involved in the census, have they even brought this up to our government concerning the census? I know we can't do a recount. I know they can't open it back up, but just consideration, because, you know, most cities, especially around North Carolina, know they still have more or the same amount of people they've had the last 10 years. So some type of offset that can be done, may we not get all of that money, but an offset for the next 10 years. Because the deal is, you know, no one really knows how long this pandemic is even gonna be around.
That is correct. They may make some concessions. I know there has been some activity in Congress, the federal government. The census was due on September 30th, but we had the extension, and then it was closed on October 15th. So there's no telling how they're going to allocate those funds, but the COVID-19, it made a lot of people afraid to open up their houses for strangers to come in and give them a count and really give them the correct message as far as the census data was concerned.
Thank you. Okay, one city, Jacksonville. It's our city, my city. This is a time for our advisory committee members to point out some great things that's been happening around Jacksonville that promotes respect, caring, and collaboration between all citizens for a better Jacksonville. And just to report actions that you've seen around the city that promotes that one city, our city, my city thought. Yeah.
Actually, probably the greatest one are the, you would say, all of those community efforts with the food giveaways.
Yeah.
Going to, whether it be children who weren't going to school, but they needed something at home, or to pure out families.
Yes.
And I think that by far, as a community, was one of the most moving things.
Yeah.
And how widespread it was.
Exactly. You know, and bringing that up about those food giveaways, Mount Carmel, you know, a local nonprofit here in Jacksonville, headed by Apostle Gary and her church, they've spread it out. And I got some numbers from them in the state of North Carolina, because they don't only do it here in Jacksonville, but they've served over 1 million families during this pandemic. 1 million families. And, you know, that's worth giving them a big hand, you know, them for collaborating with different people in their collaboration. So, you know, our hats are off to them. Mine is not so much a one city moment, but just a thought, you know, wear your mask, wait 6 feet and wash your hands. You know, think about, you know, your fellow citizen, you know, when we're doing these things, and keep each other safe. Keep each other safe. So that's my one city, my city, our city thought.
Our church, St. Julia, AME Zion Church, continues to offer the food ministry, as you were talking about. Steve was speaking about food ministries just now. each Friday. And under the leadership of Reverend Barbara Hubbard. And it's growing all the time, every Friday, rain, storms, heat. And it's gonna get cold soon, but it will continue, and it's growing. Thankful for that.
I just want to say this one thought because these food programs, they're to help our city. And you know, even not only our city, and we're mostly representation of our city, but our county also in this local area. So for those that are in need out there, please hear us. Don't feel ashamed or embarrassed. Come and get what you need. It's to help you. And that's what we're here to do, is to help in this time. So thank you for those one city moments. I appreciate it. Now we'll go on for future agenda topics. This is when we would suggest topics and fill them so we can talk about them in the future. Okay.
One of the things that I will be bringing to the committee is our presentation that we're going to be doing our community input meeting so that you all will have a chance to see what the public is also going to be seeing. It's going to be aired during one of our meetings so that if the viewing audience will be able to see what we're planning to do with that new funding that's coming in.
Thank you. Okay, with that being said, do we have any questions or comments that we'd like to submit for tonight?
Not really so much that, but to please everyone, this next Tuesday, go out and vote. If you vote early or go in person, you will get a commemorative I voted pen.
I didn't get one.
That's right.
Yeah.
It actually says, I voted in the 2020 election. So we can have a souvenir of 2020.
I didn't get a pen.
And it really writes.
Yeah, and it writes.
Yes,
And
and it really writes.
Yeah.
It's given to you to actually fill out the ballot, and you keep that pen.
And it's covered in plastic when you get it.
Yeah.
Yes. Early voting, it stops October 31st at 3 p.m.
Yes.
So that is the last time that you'll be able to do early voting. And then after that, the election is November 3rd.
Exactly. So in bringing up those key dates, the election date is November 3rd. If you haven't gotten out to vote yet, please get out to vote. What I've observed, you know, for early voting at the different polling stations, the lines, you know, they're minimal, but it's a constant flow. They're not backed up. People are not going to hassle you. So go out and vote, you know, exercise your right to vote. Amen. Next is the next city council meeting is on November 4th. This year, the virtual Freedom Fountain observance, it will be virtual this year on November 5th. Okay, then we have Veterans Day, November 11th. Then we got that public input meeting on November 12th. Please come out to that, to that venue. Please do that. Then we have a virtual nonprofit executive roundtable on the 18th. And then we have the home buyers course on November 21st. Please come out if you're a first-time buyer, you've been in your house. All of that information is very important. Come out to those classes, engage yourself. So come to that on November 21st. Then we get into the Thanksgiving Day holidays. You know, this year Thanksgiving is going to be very important. Go see your friends and family, but make sure you're safe. Make sure you're safe. If you don't go see them, call them. Then also we have the Neighborhood Improvement Services Advisory Subcommittee will be in December 9th. Then we have the Freedom Day, which is December 14th. And then we get into the two funding workshops that Ms. Tracy talked about on the 17th and 18th. And our next meeting here will be, it will be the fourth Monday at 6 p.m. unless we change the time and date. And we'll discuss that on our next meeting. And at this time, if we have no further questions, we would like to put an end to this meeting for tonight. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for your attendance.